Skulldug, an Indiana Jones-inspired game, and also a game with a lot of other references to the Age of the Pulps and to various aspects of pop culture. A game with a lot of tongue-in-cheekness. In this game, the players control adventurers that will be exploring a cave, and the cave will expand, will be explored, will be discovered by placing terrain tiles that come out of the stack adjacent to parts of the cave that are already there. As they explore the cave, the players will use items. They will start with some items. Then they will collect more items that will come out of this deck. This deck has more items, also has some treasures, but the heroes will also have to face monsters and traps that will come out of this deck. The winner of the game is the first player to collect the 3 treasures and to make his or her way back to the starting tile. Each character has 5 health points. You use these gems here to keep track of that. When a character dies, the character drops all of their items and you respawn the following turn in the starting cave. But most likely that's going to be a big problem, because if you were carrying treasures, other players will try to take them before you make it back and you collect what your previous incarnation with your clone left there. The game has a very flexible turn structure. When it is your turn, you have 3 action points and you can use them to perform any combination of available actions. And there is a good list of them. I like them very much. I wish the game came with a play area, with a little card that I can give to each player so that they have at a glance a reference of all that they can do. Unfortunately, the game doesn't have such a thing, so we leave the rulebook open, and naturally, at least in these 2 pages in this spread here, you see all of the actions. I think it's all of the available actions. Still, because of that, I believe very often players forget about some of the actions that they can take. Anyways, players will start on the starting tile. For an action during your turn, you can move to an adjacent tile or explore an unexplored edge, in which case you just declare the direction in which you're moving, you draw the top tile, and then you place it adjacent to the area that you're coming from. If there are other tiles around, you have to make sure that you connect as many connections as possible. The new tile will also tell you if there are fortunes that need to be placed there and or dangers, in which case, for example, we have a trap and then we have a treasure. The hero, the adventurer that entered the tile, has to first encounter all traps, then all monsters, and if the hero is still there after the ordeal, then the hero can collect treasures that are there. Pretty much when you are facing a danger, you see here in the square, you have the difficulty of the encounter. You roll a die, you apply all possible modifiers, and collecting items that give you modifiers is really the key of the game. It's really the strategy or the heart of the game. For example, here I have something that lets me re-roll things. Also, some items are, you see this symbol here, you can use them for as many times as the text tells you that you can use them. Other items that have here a symbol that looks more like a potion, they're consumable. You have to discard them to gain the benefit that is described there. So whenever you have an encounter that you need to resolve, that be it a monster such as the finicky Mind Eater, clearly a reference to the Mind Flayer, be it a trap, be it a monster, you roll the die. You apply all possible modifiers. If you roll equal to or higher than the difficulty, you pass the test. If it's a monster, you just defeat the monster is removed from the game. If it is a trap, not only did you defuse it, but you also managed to pick it up, and you can use it later against your opponents. Yes, there's a game where you can set traps for your opponent. However, if you fail, you simply resolve whatever it is that the on-injury effect. In this case, for example, this trap gives you an effect but doesn't give you damage. Monsters may give you physical damage, in which case you simply lose the corresponding number of health points. And also there may be other effects, for example, being dazed. That's a condition. You take this card, you can read what it does and how you remove it. It is not good to be dazed. So you're entering an area you need to encounter everything that is there. So that's for an action point. You can explore a new tile. Suppose that then later this is the situation, and then later this is the situation, etc. Just to give you a sense of what the map may look like after a while. Ooh, we got a special room here with tangling vines. So another action you can take is to dash. Dash costs a single action point, but it allows you to move one or two spaces as long as you're not resolving encounters and you're not performing actions along the way. For an action, you can pick up an item, which is in the area where you are, if there are no encounters that are preventing you from doing so. For 0 action points, you can drop an action. Maybe it's an item you don't need anymore. Then you simply drop it where you are, or you throw it. That's fun. You can throw items up to your line of sight. Maybe it's a treasure, and if somebody's stealing it from you, better no one than you, and you throw it away. Or, of course, another reason to drop stuff not where you are is to drop traps, because then the trap is there, and if somebody enters the space where you threw the trap, they have to encounter that trap. For example, suppose that we have a bear trap, which works even better on people. It is known. We know that. So I threw that trap there. Then you get there. Oh, hello, how is it going? Oh, perfectly fine. Now it's my turn again. For 1 action point, I moved there. And lo and behold, there is another action that I can take for 1 action point once per turn, which is to shove somebody. Oh, and so I'm shoving an enemy away from me, which may be ideally into a trap or for whatever the reason why I want to shove an enemy. Another thing that I can do for an action is a variant of the drop. Remember, drop, you let the thing fall or you throw it for 0 action points. The throw action is similar because I can throw an item as far as I can, as long as it's in a straight line and I have line of sight, but I'm actually using it to hit somebody on the head with that item. So I'm using the item as a weapon to hit an opponent. When I'm throwing like that, it costs an action point. Then the player, the attacker, and the defender roll dice. And if the defender rolls lower than the attacker, then the defender loses a health point. Otherwise, the throw misses and there is no effect. Other things that you can do, very interesting to me. You can destroy a passage. You can destroy a passage that is a tile that you're not in, that you're adjacent to. There may not be people there. So you spend an action to destroy that tile, and that's all that happens for now. And then later I spend an action point to explore that area. The reason to do so didn't make much sense in that case, but the reason to do so could be to open a passage. Maybe for whatever reason there is a mega trap here, then I destroy this passage for an action point, and I use another action point to discover, and oh, I'm lucky. Now I change the geography, and then there are different opportunities. Of course, I still have to encounter whatever it is there. But the idea that you can destroy passages, then, of course, is interesting because it affects things. You can also spend action points to improve your die roll. Each action point that you spend will give you a +1 on the die roll, but you have to commit to do so before you roll. So I moved here, explored here. There are these terrible, nasty encounters. As a result, I say, okay, I had 2 more action points. I spend them both to get a +2. Yay, I rolled a 4. And those are the main things. There are other actions that may be granted to you by different objects, different items that you find, but this is the general idea. You're going around encountering traps and monsters, dealing with other players, shoving them, setting traps for them, dropping things on their head. And if you hit them, they also had to drop cards. So you do all of these things, and the point of doing these things is to collect 3 treasures and be the first player with 3 treasures to make it back to the initial tile, in which case, if you're the player that manages to do so, you win the game. That is the victory condition. Skulldug reminds me of games such as Wrath of Ashardalon or Castle Ravenloft. Those are cooperative games. This one is competitive and can be very competitive, very cutthroat. But it reminds me of the general idea of flipping tiles to explore unknown areas, have encounters that have flavor and in theme, but at the same time they're mechanically very easy because it is roll a die, apply some modifiers sometimes, and sometimes you don't, and try to beat a target number and see what happens next. And I like those games, and I like this one, which seems like a simplified version with a slightly different theme, fairly different theme. You still have some of the monsters you would find there, but the tone is very different. That tone is Dungeons and Dragons, so it's adventure with some grim moments here and there. This is humorous, tongue-in-cheek, so it's a different flavor, more family-friendly, and more play something you play as you chat and you make jokes at each other's expenses if you're playing it in a cutthroat manner, and you're laughing at all of the inside jokes that you see in the art and in the components. So in that sense, it is definitely pleasant. It is funny that I would review it now, and just last week I played a game that was called Ghostbusters, the board game 2, and in the game I complained that the game is pretty complicated, it's very fiddly, a lot of rules and exceptions and special procedure for that weapon and for that monster, scenarios that are pretty complicated with a lot of unique rules, so that I'm okay learning if I'm playing a historical game and learning about history. If I had to go through all those things just for a fantasy type of game, maybe not that much. And the problem with that game is that you have all of that complexity, and all that it boils down to is you move next to a monster and roll a die, and you're trying to roll 5 or more or 4 or more, which is what you have in Skulldug without all of the destruction. To me, the two things, the two games are like two sides of the same coin. Skulldug does it right, Ghostbusters, the board game 2, does not. That game is a little too overbloated. This one is lean and simple. It is about flip the next tile and flip the next encounter card and see what kind of like serious or hilarious monster you find and see what kind of useful treasure you can find. And since the experience is simple, then I'm perfectly fine with rolling a d6 and trying to roll a 4. And then I'm still actually here using cards and consumables and making some decisions that, while simple, are not necessarily obvious. Actually, especially when it comes to using game effects that let you manipulate the map. There is an item that lets you rotate the tiles. You may destroy a tile to get a new tile. There's that interesting puzzle element there, which I did not expect with a game that seems to be so much just about the romp of going out there and fighting and fighting treasures, but I don't mind it at all. It adds that interesting element without distracting from the hilarious and an entertaining theme. I also like the fact that the game can be played in different modes, by which I mean two things. One is, yes, you can play team, solo, like individual players against each other. You can play it as teams, so you can play it solitaire. That's a nice option to have. Also different modes, meaning you can play it as almost multiplayer solo, as players go in different directions and explore different areas of the cave, and it may be done, it may be played exactly that way, like a parallel race, or really nasty cutthroat. You choose how much take that and backstabbing you want to have. If players go after each other, it almost may feel like it's arena in the cave, in which finding treasures almost becomes secondary, as opposed to spy versus spy, setting up traps, pushing each other into that trap, destroying a tile to get the opponent stuck, and the opponent to spend an action to draw a new tile, and maybe it's not, and to come back, and maybe it's not the tile to let them go where they want to go. It can really get interesting and intense there, and anything in between the multiplayer solo and just mud fighting arena in the cave. You can have, of course, all sort of intermediate mix of the two elements. And so it is a game that has something for different types of players and groups. In general, whichever mode you choose, whichever style you choose, it is a game that it's fun, it's simple, it is silly, but it still has some interesting decisions here and there. It still has resource management and a little puzzle spatial element. So gameplay wise, it is very enjoyable because the theme is enjoyable, the components look good, and they are entertaining. And gameplay, again, while simple, has some interesting decisions and different aspects that they go well together. Also, I really like the flexible turn structure that you can decide to use in very different ways, creating different combinations of actions every time. In general, Skulldug. Skulldug may seem simple when you think, well, just a game about going around and rolling a die. Then you see other games that are based on the same idea and don't implement it nearly as well. So you need to give credit, because an easy idea does not always result in a good game. This one happens to do. It is a simple game based on a simple idea, but it's fun and it works.